We'll talk about food on the way out.
You good?
We'll talk about food for the rest of our lesson.
Yeah.
What we do. So,
Okay, as we stuff our faces.
yeah. Speaking of Asarah BeTevet,
Speaking about food.
so
Yeah.
we have the fast coming up this Friday. Many of us are incredulous that there is such a thing as fasting on Friday. It doesn't happen all that often. It's probably once or twice every, I think it's every 9 years that it actually comes
Is there
up.
any Asarah BeTevet that can happen on Friday?
Asarah BeTevet, I think, I don't want to say 100% for sure. Shiva Asarah BeTammuz, I don't believe it's possible. I don't think Tisha B'Av comes in before Shabbat like that. It can happen on Shabbat, but then it gets bounced to Sunday. Asarah BeTevet, I'm pretty sure.
Because Purim for sure not.
From memory, no. So I'm pretty sure because it'll be Tani Tester, but it happens in Yerushalayim. They have what's called the Purim Shulash, but it's only because they make certain things happen before Shabbat. Because the Aniyim, the would be expecting them before Shabbat. But, yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Does it mean that we're going to read the Torah on Friday afternoon?
It means we read Torah Friday afternoon. Yeah.
Big goodbye, man.
Right?
Big goodbye.
Right. Note to self. Right. Come 5 minutes early. So, so a lot of people are surprised at this concept of fasting on Friday. That
You enter Shabbat.
you enter Shabbat in a fast. So it helps that Asarah BeTevet is probably one of the shortest days of the year. In other words, the fast starts at just before 6 o'clock and it ends at 5 o'clock. I mean, it's less than 12 hours. It's really not that big a deal. It's also relatively cold outside, so it's not like Shiva Asarah Tammuz, ShaBa in the middle of the summer where as much as you drank before the fast, you sweat it off. This is a relatively short day. A fascinating historical detail. You know, there were many communities in which people fasted every Friday. That actually appears in the Shulchan Aruch, in the halachot of Shabbat. I'll imagine that. We have trouble enough keeping up with the eating on Shabbat. The Shulchan Aruch actually mentions that for generations there is this ancient tradition where people used to fast every Erev Shabbat. They would, in fact, this is the ideal way for us to bring in Shabbat, save for the morning over Beit HaMikdash. This is the ideal way for us to begin Shabbat, is with a fast. They used to fast the entire day on Friday in order to welcome the Shabbat with an appetite, not just a physical appetite. I would actually posit, and I don't think I'd be that wrong, that your appetite is not as tremendous after you fast and you're tired as it is when you're active and you're working. So this used to be the practice of the ancients, people, Hasidim and Ma'aseh, people who are pious and people who take their mitzvot very seriously. And for that matter, many of them still do. Don't hear too much about it today, but in Yerushalayim, I think I just love people who are so sensitive and careful about their mitzvot. So it's not that unusual a thing for us to begin the Shabbat with a fast. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch praises this as the ideal way for one to accept the Shabbat. You basically wake up the entire day thinking about nothing but getting that Shabbat meal. It's even that much more anticipated, that much more craved, that much more delicious if you can just push off your eating until such time as Shabbat begins. The only catch is that on Asarah BeTevet, we're not going to all this talk about fasting and such. I want to start stashing calories for the drought. So the one catch is that if you are fasting on Erev Shabbat as a matter of voluntary pious practice, one could make the case for concluding the fast potentially once you have begun the Shabbat, which may end up being before the sun is actually set. May not be familiar with this, but you can begin the Shabbat as early as Plaga Mincha. Shabbat in most Jewish communities in the world, Ashkenazim and Sephardim alike, they used to start Shabbat as early as possible. There's a whole dispute amongst the Rishonim when we talk about this concept of Leosif min hol ala chodesh. You're adding from the profane secular day of either Friday or Sunday, depending on which direction you stretch Shabbat. Our generation, where everybody's late, wake up late, go to bed late, so we like to end Shabbat late. It's a lot easier than starting it early, because a lot of us get to Shabbat with our panting, with our out of breath, and our tongues hanging out. So In reality, the most ideal way to prolong Shabbat, to extend Shabbat, is to begin it early. And if that were the case, pretty much everything that applies to Friday doesn't apply from the time that you were to begin Shabbat. So I can choose to stop doing melacha before Shabbat. I can light the candles and announce that I've accepted Shabbat upon myself. Talk about that in just a second. It may not necessarily be the case that you're obligated to do so. But I have the authority, anyone has the authority to start Shabbat as early as Pelag Mincha. How do we define it? 72 minutes before the stars come out. Stars coming out and how we define that is a whole other discussion. But you can figure easily on anywhere between 30, 40 minutes before the actual sunset itself. So if I were to pray Mincha, let's say 10, 15 minutes in advance of that, and then decide to pray Arabit at Pelag Mincha, I could start Shabbat while the sun is still up.
Would that mean you could break the fast?
So, excellent question. We customarily do not shorten the fast on Friday, even though, look, the fast itself is rabbinic in nature. It's not written in the Torah, fast on the 10th day.
Kiddush is midoraita, no?
Kiddush is an obligation, midoraita. It's a biblical obligation, but you can fulfill this obligation by waiting until after the stars come out.
Yeah, true.
Which is typically what we would do. So it's a good question. We fast the entire length of the day. Just by way of fascinating discussion, it's not so clear. Where else do we find anywhere in the Torah, by the way, that something that a day only lasts half a day? In other words, if this is the day that we're commemorating the destruction of BeTevet, or one of them, why don't we just fast the whole 24-hour period? For that matter, what's the status of the night before? I ask because our son Chanoch is turning 10 on Asarah BeTevet, as he does every year, because this is his birthday. And bemoans the fact, and likes to sing to himself, said birthday to me. Said birthday to me. So do we, are we crossing the limits of good taste if we were to throw him a birthday party on the night before? Is it a fast? Well, it's not technically a fast day, because it's not a fast night anyway, because we don't fast at night. If that's the case, is there anything wrong with us baking a cake and having a party? I mean, I won't do it the following day. Fine, agreed. I concede. I'll fast, that daylight half of the day, but the nighttime half of the calendar day. What would be the problem with me, in theory, having cake and indulging? If it's permissible for me to eat, what does it make a difference? What I'm eating and what I'm not. Here you have some interesting writing, probably more hashkafic than halachic. Because halachically speaking, you can probably do whatever it is that you need to do on the night before a fast. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu writes that, yes, although it's permissible for one to eat or drink on the night before, in fact, Chazal, our sages, did not decree that we should be fasting for any period of time, save for from the dawn until the stars come out. Nonetheless, he adds, it's proper and appropriate that we should conduct ourselves with a much heavier head than perhaps we otherwise might on any other normal night of the year. So, puts the kibosh on the celebrations on Chanoch's birthday until the fast has come to its conclusion, but you are certainly permitted to eat or drink whatever you want the night before, the entire night. And there's another question as to what happens if you'd like to wake up early in order to eat or drink something before the fast. I wish that muscle were flexed during the rest of the year when it was just a matter of getting up and coming to minyan, but some of us are motivated to wake up early in order to eat, and others wake up early types for other reasons.
So just to take a step back, so Asarah BeTevet commemorates Nebuchadnezzar breaching the walls of Yerushalayim?
The siege laid on Yerushalayim for its destruction.
Oh.
The 17th of Tammuz, when the walls of the city were breached.
Oh.
The 9th of Av is when the Beit HaMikdash was actually burnt. So
I don't think you answered. So if you accept Shabbat early, are you allowed to break the fast?
we don't
Or
hold
should you
this way.
just go home and just wait?
Right. No, it's an excellent question. We don't hold this way. We don't hold that you beginning the Shabbat cuts the calendar day short. So if the calendar day is a day of minimal significance, meaning it's a Friday, nothing wrong with you stealing from Friday in order to begin the Shabbat early. You can choose to obligate yourself in not doing melacha. You fulfill your biblical obligation of kiddush, right? You have a mitzvah from the Torah to welcome the Shabbat, to begin the Shabbat with kiddush. then you fulfill your biblical obligation to make Kiddush, even if you make it early.
Okay.
That's a novelty. That's a novel concept. If Shabbat is defined, if any day is defined, biblically speaking, from the sunset or the stars coming out, right, until either the sunset or the stars coming out the following night, how could I possibly fulfill a biblical obligation of making Kiddush, of, announcing this is Shabbat over a glass of wine, when it's not on the calendar day yet anyway, not yet Shabbat. So that's the novelty of the concept of
Bringing in
adding
Shabbat
from
early.
the secular profane day onto Shabbat. You can fulfill your biblical obligation, even though technically on the calendar, as far as the IRS is concerned, it's still Friday. So the fiscal week hasn't yet come to its conclusion, but you can still, with that little window of time before, 72 minutes before the stars come out, you're still entitled to make your Kiddush and fulfill your obligation. However, we don't hold that it would make the day any shorter for any other purposes than Shabbat. In other words, if there is a rabbinic decree that we should fast on this day, we don't relieve you of this obligation to fast on this day because you'd like to begin Shabbat earlier. A little bit more bluntly, if this is the week you decided to be a tzaddik and start Shabbat as early as you possibly can,
No way.
start next week and call me in another year. So, the expression in Arabic is, a guy fasted the first day of Ramadan and he asked that God should save the world, and those who are there reply, there's another 39 days to Ramadan, take it easy, like, you're not that big a tzaddik just yet. So yes, you are always encouraged to begin Shabbat as early as possible. In fact, if you really want to be a tzaddik, what you can do is you can pray Arvit of Shabbat as early as possible. You can observe every other aspect of Shabbat, like not cooking, not baking, not slaughtering, not writing, not welding, burning, etc. All these things can be observed, save for the food part, and that part you can save. You can reserve until after the stars come out. So effectively you've gained both. You've begun Shabbat as early as you possibly can. You just haven't violated this concept of rabbinic, though it may be, of fasting on the 10th day of Tevet. So we're not especially put off by the concept of Shabbat beginning with a fast, because the reality is it's appealing to us. We like the idea of fasting and differentiating Friday from the rest of the week, and then making this great segue into Shabbat. So if you choose to go to sleep early and to wake up early, because all of our tzaddik genes get awoken when it comes to fasting. Very hard to wake up on any other day of the year, regardless of when the sun rises or the sun sets. Just that all of a sudden when there's a fast, I will do my darndest. I'll set 5 alarms in order to wake myself up and eat or drink something before the fast starts. So if this is our motivation, we hope and we pray that we should be able to divert it towards making it more of a permanent habit, waking up earlier and going to bed earlier. Really is the harder half of that equation. There is such an understanding amongst the poskim that when you go to sleep, you assume you're not waking up that much in advance of the dawn. For most of us, that's pretty true all the time. You go to bed and you don't wake up until the sun forces you to, or until some kind of alarm goes off. So if you went to bed and you had pretty much given up on eating or drinking, assuming you're going to wake up and you're going to be fasting, there is such an understanding that that's probably your default thought. That's probably what you had in mind when you went to bed, and therefore you would have, by way of neder, if you will, by an act that kind of implies an acceptance of the terms and conditions of the fast. You go to sleep, and then when you wake up, you shouldn't be eating. Though it's possible that you can drink, the Zohar seems to hold this way. Better yet, that before you go to sleep, you make a condition, and this is the easiest day of the year to do it, because it's the fast that starts the latest. It also ends the earliest, but it starts the latest. So for some of us, getting up out of bed before 11 o'clock, we said, was going to be difficult, but if on this particular day you can get up before 6 o'clock, even if only temporarily, you should be able to do so. The ideal way to do this would be to make a condition before you go to sleep. You could say, basically, I go to sleep on the condition that I should be able to eat or drink when I wake up. If it's before the dawn, before Al Shachar, you can wake up, you can eat, you can drink whatever you want, and go back to sleep. Hysterical little anecdote I have to share with you. I've heard this before, but when I was teaching in elementary school 8 years ago, there was a young Taimani boy, very, very bright child. And we had this discussion about, we were learning about the Shema. So the last pasuk of the second paragraph describes if we observe the mitzvot, do what Hashem wants us to do, etc. Hashem brings the rains, and life is happy and healthy and plentiful. So the last pasuk says, it concludes this paragraph, literally, all of this such that you should, your days and the days of your descendants should be many. You should live long, fruitful, happy, productive lives on the land that Hashem promised your forefathers promised He was going to give to your forefathers. Kimei hashamayim al haaretz, like the days of heaven on earth. It's a very loaded statement. So I'm explaining this to kids in the first grade. All right, this is 6 going on 7. It's not a very sophisticated age, but the kids are starting to grasp certain concepts. So, how do you explain heaven? How do you explain earth to kids that don't know all that much about either one? So we started talking about this idea, this concept of the world being somewhat physical, and people pass away. Physical body is no longer there, but Shema lives forever, etc. Shamayim, nothing hurts, nothing's painful, no hunger, no jealousy, no sadness, no diseases. So one of the girls piped up and started talking about her grandmother, who had just passed away a week or two before that, and her father was very close to her. And her father explained to her that now that Savta passed away, she's not sick or tired or suffering anymore. Timani kid pops up, Yagel, and he says, Rabbi, I have a question. So, you know how people die, the neshama is separated from the body? I said, yeah, that's how we look at it. She says to me, and then when you go to sleep, Hashem takes your neshama away too. I said, yeah, to a certain degree. He says to me, so if I wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, does he give it back? It's a pretty good question for a 6-year-old child. I said, yeah, I guess you make it to the bathroom and back. Chances are you got a temporary lease on your neshama, at least for a little bit. So if you're able to free yourself from the chains of death and actually wake up early in order to eat or drink, you can go back to sleep afterwards. The question that's bothering Andrea, though, is what happens with this interdiction of eating before you prayed? There is such a thing. Lo tochlu al adam, the Torah tells us. You should not eat on the blood, literally, maybe while the blood is out, before the korban has been brought. If you have a korban to bring, you have a sacrifice to take care of, you shouldn't eat beforehand, great. The Gemara tells us because prayer corresponds to the sacrifices, one should not eat, certainly not a meal based on bread, before you've prayed. In fact, we discourage eating of any kind before you've actually prayed in the morning. This provided the time for tefillah has already come. So if it happens to be so early in the morning that I can't even pray shacharit because the dawn hasn't even broken yet, then I'm not in violation of anything. If I want to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, do netilat yadayim, have myself a turkey, mustard, mayo, lettuce, tomato sandwich, make birkat hamazon, and go back to sleep. I have this craving for smoked turkey. I don't know why. Anyway, someone was talking to me about smoked turkey for like an hour. That's what it was. Anyway,
if you started the
subliminal,
meal before the fast, can you continue it like on Motzei Shabbat? If we say Hamotzi before Shkia, we continue, and then we say Birkat Hamazon with Ritzeh and all of the inclusions.
A story like this in the Gemara. Rabbi Avidan Elkin was sitting down over a big lavish spread, a big meal. He's very wealthy. They're having a big meal, he and his students. And one of them pointed out the meal had gone on so long that Shabbat had started. So he said, okay, what do we do? Apparently they already prayed Mincha early on Friday. So they thought for a second, said, okay, no problem. Change the tablecloth, make it a white tablecloth. He lifted a glass, made Kiddush, went back to eating. So this is, we just take a quick break, change something at the table, make Kiddush, and then we go back to eating. So there's no interdiction of continuing a meal that you had started before. In fact, we hold that way anytime you're not supposed to be eating, you're not supposed to be beginning to eat. If you had started a meal, so here in New York, Chanukah, and you can light the candles at what? 4:45. Say you got busy at work, you had meetings, whatever, had a late lunch. and you started eating, all of a sudden you realize, hey, I could be lighting the Hanukkah candles right now. So technically you shouldn't be eating before you light them because you might start eating and whatever and forget to do it. If you've already started eating, go ahead and continue. If you had started to eat before you do Bdikat Chametz, the same thing. You're not supposed to eat or drink until you do drink water if you need to, before you check for the Chametz. What happens if you start eating beforehand? Okay, so we don't stop. We don't start. If you had already started, you may continue afterwards or keep it going. So theoretically possible. Going to be tough to do this particular week, but any other week, if you did start to eat beforehand, you're welcome to continue. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Eat all day long.
Just keep it going. No, so if you started eating before the dawn, you would need to stop for the fast. In other words,
That was my question.
Oh, I thought you
let's
mentioned
say,
Shabbat.
I'm sorry. I was drawing the parallel. So let's say I'm with the Shacha is 5:30, and you started a meal at 5. Can you continue the meal till 6? Like you just kept eating for an hour.
On a normal morning, yes. Not on one in which there's a fast.
So it overrides. Okay,
yeah.
So you need to have already made the Katan Mazon?
If you woke up, read Tikkun Chatzot and started eating bread, then you can continue that meal until whenever. Just make Birkat Hamazon and go to Shachrit, right? But the direction of eating around then is not that it's forbidden to eat. You shouldn't be starting a meal. If you already started one, you're within your rights to continue it. You want to drink, etc. But once there's a fast day coming, you basically would have to cut that short. Nothing else you can do about that. So yes, a couple other items regarding the night before the fast. Ben Ish Chai holds in the Siddur Mordechai Eliyahu that any of the things that you typically wouldn't do on a fast day, you probably shouldn't do the night before. I mean, eating and drinking, Chazal, let this go. It's a curiosity, by the way, how that works out. That there is such a thing as a fast that only lasts half a day. Nothing else halachically lasts half a day. I say half a day, meaning the daylight hours of the day. Tisha B'Av is the night and the following day. Yom Kippur is this way, so is Shabbat, so is Yom Tov. Rosh Chodesh, Chol HaMoed. Why all of a sudden when it comes to these fasts, we have such a concept as a half fast? So here's some interesting information from the Arizal. It appears in Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh, one of there are kind of 8 very basic books that were composed in his name, and then a few other collections and redactions that include some things that weren't in there and some things that were. So Sha'ar Ruach HaKodesh is an entire book written on how to achieve and maintain Ruach HaKodesh. I can tell none of you have read it because I haven't made predictions in the future yet. No, even though the information is there, it's not like it's easy things to do. So he talks about fasting quite a bit in that book. It's almost half of it. Fasting here, fasting there, fasting for 1, 2, 3 days in a row without breaking at night or anything. Not easy stuff. So he mentions that a simple, like a half-day fast, meaning one of these Asarah BeTevet deals, except when you're obligated to anyway, you don't get any extra credit for doing what you're supposed to. You get credit for fasting one day. And he has all these calculations for different things you might have done and how you can atone for them by fasting, because it's clear to Chazal in the Gemara, there's no way of doing Teshuvah without accepting upon yourself voluntary fasts. So fasting the night and the day, he counts as 13 of these units. There is such a thing as fasting the night and the day on a voluntary basis. You accept the fast upon yourself after you pray Mincha the day before. At the conclusion of the Amidah, there's a paragraph, many Sephardi Siddurim still have it. And then you get credit as if you fasted 13 half days. So you can make such a substitution if you'd like to. It's not that much harder, but apparently you get a lot more credit for doing it. I think 2 days in a row it gives you credit for 27, an extra one there. And 3 days in a row he said it's, the calculation is that it's, I believe, 83. 3 days in a row. I know someone who did this. I know a few people who did this. I should.
Are you joking?
No. Fasting 72 hours straight.
83 what?
No.
He counts it like it's the equivalent of fasting 83 half days.
No,
Ah.
drinking. He's getting
No
extra
eating,
credit for that?
no drinking. Meaning he counts it as much more meaningful than just 3 simple day fasts. It's a lot harder to
Hold
do.
on, so I don't understand this.
No, I'm not talking about Asarah BeTevet specifically. I'm just saying in general, if, God forbid, anyone did something really wrong that you may at some point want to atone for, but in a genuinely deep and meaningful way,
You don't need to.
fasting would be the way to do it. And depending on what was violated, you would, you can just fast intensively over a longer period of time, or scatter around smaller fasts.
Half day, what do you mean? I didn't
So fasting
understand
from
the answer.
the morning to the night
Yeah,
is a simple fast.
okay.
You count that as one.
Okay.
So There's also this calculation that fasting the night before plus the following day is much more meaningful.
So those are the simple fasts, and then Yom Kippur and ShaBa are
Right, just you don't get any extra credit for fasting Yom Kippur, meaning you do it because you have to. But if
Yeah.
you were to make Yom Kippur out of a regular weekday, meaning I fast
you get
because
extra credit for a simple fast?
you can take upon yourself voluntary fasts. Yeah, I decided yesterday somebody really bothered me and I said something I shouldn't have said, so I decided that today I'm going to, I used to do this.
No, we should all be fasting every day of every of our lives.
Probably.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's not even a joke.
It's really the
If
best
we
thing.
really cared, well, I'll tell you this, if, you know that concept of every time you use a bad word or you do something else, speak Lashon Hara, you put a coin in the tzedakah box, and you see this coin stacking up, and you say, well, that's a lot of money that could have been gone, you know, put so much for productive use. So if you had to fast every time you made a mistake, you'd probably just think twice about making mistakes.
But on Shabbat it's a mitzvah to eat, right?
You can fast 6 days in a row, just not eat on Shabbat. Yeah.
No, eat on Shabbat.
I mean, sorry, and just not fast on Shabbat. Yes.
One of the excuses for never making dinner. I was really bad today, sorry.
Well, they'd have to fast the following day.
Then you have to fast for not cooking.
Yeah, but
Yeah, so you
no, so
more.
it sounds
comes first.
right. Because clearly, in a couple, my desire comes before, as expressed by food. So, so I'm just putting that out there. People sometimes make a big deal out of fasting half a day here, half a day there, when in reality, it's probably something we don't do enough of. All I can say is I can strongly recommend it if you happen to find a day that you aren't extraordinarily busy, maybe easier to do in the winter than it is in the summer. It's a powerful thing. It's a powerful concept. You really don't
fast
realize.
And then you do what? You like study Torah, or like what?
You can fast and go to work. It doesn't
Really?
matter. Fasting is a very automatic
How do
thing.
you decide
You're not
when it
eating your
ends?
things.
How do you decide when it ends?
When the stars come out. You calculate it. If anyone's interested, I can send you this little voluntary paragraph. Again, you don't need to recite this before a fast day that's on the calendar, but if you'd like to fast for whatever reason, it's an extremely powerful thing. Give you a really nice, well, there's a Gemara that talks about Masechet Ta'anit that says one of the Muraim, when he would conclude a voluntary fast, not a fast that he's obligated to fast anyway. I repeat for the fourth time, you get no extra credit for doing what you're obligated to do. So no one can brag and pat themselves on the back like, ha, I just fasted on Yom Kippur, so I deserve this, that, and the other thing. No, that you're supposed to do anyway. If you do accept upon yourself a voluntary fast, you would conclude the fast by saying, Rabbi Shalom, creator of the world, it is clear and obvious, evident before you that when Beit HaMikdash was in existence, one who sinned would offer a sacrifice, and what was burnt from this sacrifice on the Mizbeach, on the altar, was the chelev, the abdominal fats, and the blood. And now that Beit HaMikdash is destroyed because of our numerous sins, we don't have the opportunity, the ability to offer animal sacrifices in our stead. But I chose, instead of this, to accept upon myself a fast, as a result of which I've diminished my fats and my blood. Right? This is the real solution to gaining weight. It's one thing to go on a diet and eat a whole bunch of other things, just not eating is a great way to diminish your fats and your blood. So basically what he's saying is that, and he concludes the tefillah by saying, may it be your will that the fat and the blood that I have diminished, meaning the excesses that I just cut out of my life, at least for this particular period, half day, whole day, 2-3 days, etc., should be considered before you as if I had offered a sacrifice and burnt them on the Mizbeach. And you should forgive me for my iniquity. It's a pretty powerful concept. Fat generally represents excess. So this excess indulgence, eating more than we need, taking more from Olam Hazeh than we actually, from this world than we actually need. And the only way to really give it back is by purging yourself of indulgence and excess on a subsequent day. So if I eat too much and now I'm a little bit heavier than I should be, the only way for me to make good on that is to not eat until the body burns through these calories. And it has this atoning effect. if avirot are very often the result of indulgence in excess, then that's how you make up for that. So, we should have a meaningful fast, and maybe this desire to wake up early and eat or drink should last for the rest of our lives. So wake up early and pray and stuff. I agree.
Chazak Baruch.